So after seeing Deebs and Scribble sort of fixating on their own little treasures there, I'm gonna take out my druidic focus, and with the events since I've left my mountain home, I'm just kind of hold it in my palm and just sort of like stare at it and have like this look of just contemplation on my face.
What have you got there, Solmia?
Sort of, snapping out of it, I look over at Lunalia and I say, "This is my druidic focus. It's Sasha's fang."
Who is Sasha?
So then I kind of have like a sad look on my face, and I look at the party and I say, "It's a long story, but if everyone wants to hear it, I'd be happy to share."
Looking
Noros.
around, I think we have nothing but time.
Yeah, Nora starts rummaging through stuff and starts to listen.
All right, so talking out of character, so I practice this a bunch, but I might stutter, so just kind of like bear with me, and hopefully you guys like it. All right, so I kind of stare back at the fang in my hand and start recounting. So when I was just a baby, and really, and I don't have I can't think of a time before Sasha was in my life, but my guardian told me that when I was still just a baby and my bassinet, he went and got a winter wolf pup, and as soon as he laid the pup next to me, he took to me instantly and basically didn't leave my side. My guardian then finally gave me a name, and same with the winter wolf, and he named me Solmia and the winter wolf Sasha after his brother and sister. So one thing I need to say is, it might sound weird, but winter wolves can actually speak common, and so there began my friendship and with my mentor and protector and companion. As the years went by, he taught me how to walk, he taught me how to talk, he taught me how to run. We'd play hide and seek in our mountain cave. As we got older, we eventually started exploring outside. We were finally told by, and he's not around to correct me, so I'll just call him Papa. He was always so serious with me. He always corrected me I should call him Guardian. But anyhow, Papa said that me and Sasha needed to finally start putting food on the table, and so I had my bow with me and my little hunting knife, and we'd go out and try to hunt for small game like hares and the like. And so I always missed. For years I would miss, but Sasha was always so patient, and he would quickly catch all the rabbits for us, and he'd always tell Papa that I did half of the work. So the years go by, I get older, Sasha gets bigger. We start exploring further and further out from our home. He starts telling me things like there's these large bodies of water called the ocean, and these long areas of sand called the desert. There's forests and jungles, and telling me about all these various animals and creatures and races of people. And I remember always just looking at him at the time like, how can he possibly know this? He's experiencing life just as I am. We're just here in our mountain cave. And so, the years continue to pass. We continue to grow up together. I actually finally start hitting things with my bow and finally pulling my weight. There was one time that I had shot a hare in its hind legs, and I remember just seeing the creature just in obvious pain, just wiggling and screaming, and I was just paralyzed. I couldn't move. I didn't really know what to do, and Sasha looked over and said, "You need to put it out of its misery." And again, I stood there just frozen. So him being as kind and gentle as he always was with me, he went over and quickly put it out of its misery, and he looked at me at the way he always would. And he told me about that there's a cycle to things, that we need to be grateful for these creatures that give their life so that we can continue on, and that when we die, we'll become fertilizer for the soil or food for the worms, and birds will eat the worms. And he kept going on and just saying we're all part of the same cycle. And basically the message was it's okay and to not be scared. So I get older, he gets bigger, he's really starting to come into his own. That gives us the courage to start exploring further and further away. We finally run into another wolf pack one day, and he tells me to stay behind him, so I do. And he goes up, and what he later told me was the alpha of the other pack greeted him. You know, they exchange odd sounds and weird motions that wolves do, and the other wolf rejoined their pack, and off they went. And Sasha came back to me, and he started telling me what they talked about and all of that. And he told me that they hunted where we were walking, and they just wanted to make sure that we were friendly. She had asked him where his pack was, and he let her know that I was his pack. And I asked, so did she have a name? And he tried explaining it to me, and I still don't quite understand it, but the wolves that lived in our mountain range, they don't really have names like Lunalia or Deebs or Scribble or Nora or Solmia for that matter. It's more of like an emotion. So for instance, this one was the way your paws feel on fresh snow. And over the years when we would meet other packs of wolves and he'd talk to their alpha, it'd be similar. It would be wind on a clear night, the way water tastes from a fresh mountain spring, or the way that your jaws feel when crunching into bone. One night, we found this cliff, and I joked and said it was our special secret place, but as I got older, I realized how silly that was because it was so obvious where this cliff was. But again, Sasha just played along. He thought it was fun. So we would go up there, and on clear nights, we just look up at the sky and look at the stars. And when you're up that high on a clear night, you can raise your hand, and it's almost like you can touch the stars. The first night we were up there, I saw this constellation, and it looked like a wolf and a girl. You know, I'd say over to Sasha, like, "Do you see that?" And he immediately knew what I was talking about. So that was our special constellation, we would say. We would go up there night after night, especially when it was clear, and we would just stare for hours. I eventually started making up little stories, and if they weren't any good, he never let me know. He'd always tell me to keep going. His favorite was about this magic snowshoe hare that whoever caught it would get a wish, and he said that was his favorite. And you know, we would wish that we could do this forever. So as time went on, I started being more and more comfortable. I could finally hit with my bow accurately, and if I couldn't, I was no longer scared to put the animals out of their misery. we went really far one day and came across another wolf pack. It was the same old thing. I stayed back while he approached, except for this time, their alpha just started growling at me, just very aggressively. I just didn't know what to do, and Sasha, his hair stood on edge. His tail got bushy, this violent look in his eye. I'll be honest, it terrified me. I didn't quite know what to do. Before, I mean, it felt like an hour, but it must have been just a second. He leapt on this wolf. He took his throat in his mouth and shook him. He didn't harm him necessarily. There wasn't any blood, but as soon as Sasha backed off, the wolf got back up and got as low to the ground as he could. His ears were back, his tail was behind him, and he went back to his pack. Like what always happened, Sasha told me what happened, and apparently this wolf was asking why a winter wolf would be associated with a human when winter wolves are proud and should be running with their own packs. And Sasha just said I'm his pack, and he wasn't going to deal with that. So again, the years pass, and we continue our stargazing, exploring, and this one night, we after stargazing, we walk down, and I see this beautiful elk, and the horns were just amazing. I'd never seen anything like it. So I whispered to Sasha. I said, "Why don't we go ahead and follow it and just kind of see where it goes?" My ever faithful and trusting friend, he just said sure. So we followed behind and just watched it go from here to there. We were darting behind boulders and rocks, trying to be sneaky about it. And then out of nowhere, this huge, monstrous beast came out of nowhere, picked the elk up, and I'll never forget the sound it made of just bones crunching and this just god-awful sound the elk was making as it was being eaten alive right in front of me. I stood there paralyzed with fear. I just didn't know what to do. Sasha tried pulling me, saying it'll smell your fear, and sure enough it did. It looked right at me and began to charge me, and again I couldn't move, and there was this flash of white before me. It was Sasha again. His hair on edge, tail bushed, his fangs and eyes, just this vicious monster versus monster. I couldn't believe it. This is my friend. And, tooth and claw, just this wild fight, this primal force in front of me. I just didn't know what to do but just watch. Finally, the beast got the better of Sasha and knocked him down to the ground, and instead of Sasha getting up, he just laid there. I knew if I didn't do anything, my friend was going to die. So if I got pushed beyond fear, or I don't know what happened, but my primal nature, it just took over. I took my hunting knife out. I ran as fast as I could, faster than I ever thought was possible. I leapt. I jumped on this beast's back and started stabbing its neck over and over. Stab, stab, stab. I don't know how many times I did it. It's still kind of a blur, but I just remember the feeling of its paws on my head as it shook me off and threw me like a rag doll into a nearby boulder. My head was buzzing. My sides ached. My ribs must have been cracked. It's this buzzing noise in my head. My vision was blurry. I couldn't hear anything, and the monster just held its neck where I had been stabbing, and he wanted to finish the job with me. And of course, before he could get to me, Sasha, in one last leap, he jumped up and grabbed it by its throat and whether it was where I was stabbing or not, he ripped the monster's throat out, and the monster grabbed where its throat used to be, took a couple steps, and fell to the ground, and Sasha, too, fell to the ground. I couldn't walk, so I just crawled as fast as I could to where my friend was. He was hurt. I'd never seen him that way. He looked at me and he said, "You have to be brave, Solmia. I have to leave you." And gosh, I couldn't believe it. I was screaming. I said, "No, Papa can fix you. We just got to get back." And he said, "Just be brave." And I just kept fighting. I said, "No, let's just get up. Let's walk. We can make it." And so finally, knowing how stubborn I was, he just said, "Okay, but let's just rest for a minute. Let's just look at the stars." So then, I lay on my back and he puts his head in my lap and I start petting my friend. He tells me, will you tell me that story about the hare? The one that grants the wishes?" And I say, "Of course." So I start saying the story and he interrupts me and he says, "I love you." And, I say, "I love you too." And so I start telling my story, and before I can end the first sentence, my friend's gone. I lay up and his eyes, the life is gone. So I close them and I howl at the moon. I just wail in pain, screaming, howling like I never thought was possible. And I hear a wolf in the distance return it. It's like this distress call, and then you can hear wolves in the distance. It's kind of like their way of communicating. They were spreading the distress call, and I look into the sky and there's my guardian, his giant eagle form that I'd seen him turn into so many times. He landed and I saw him assess the situation, and all he said was, can you climb on?" And he put his wing down and I climbed on top, and he gently picked up Sasha in his talons and flew us back to our home. When we got back, I sat there and I tried to clean the blood off of Sasha. He had this beautiful white coat. It just didn't make sense. You could see his ribs, you could see his organs, and I was trying my best to try to make something of it, but Papa, he put his hand on my back and he said, "Sasha deserves a warrior's burial," and I just nodded my head, and he then told me about where he came from and how they build these ornate funeral pyres that burn hot enough to where bone and tooth are gone, so that the warrior can return back to the earth as quick as possible. So I just nod my head and I just say, "Can we please do it on the cliff where we would look at stars?" And he says, "We can try, but the wind it blows so hard there, but we can try." So then he tells me, Sasha had been talking to me about you needing to be able to defend yourself if he wasn't around, and just kind of looked at him puzzled, like, what? Sasha was talking to you? And so anyways, he goes on, and he would always protest because Sasha was my protector and he didn't want me to get involved with the druid stuff. He wanted me to stay innocent, but he wanted to honor Sasha's wishes, and so he said he would begin training me. I later came to find out that every night after I went to bed, Papa would talk to Sasha and share with him what he should teach me the next day. And so anyway, the first spell he teaches me, and I sort of look up from Sasha's fang, and I look at the group and I cast produce flame, and I sort of expertly twirl it in my fingers, not even thinking about it. And then I just sort of wink it out and I say this. The first spell he taught me was produce flame. He said I needed to send my friend off. And so we went on about constructing the pyre. Dozens and dozens of wolves started showing up. They all were carrying wood to the cliff, and I couldn't do anything. I just watched my guardian construct this elaborate pyre. It must have been magical, because wood just doesn't stack like that. So anyway, the sun begins to set, and he lifts Sasha on top. He pushes me forward. I know what I need to do. I put my hand on my friend one last time. I say a prayer to him and a prayer for him. And I close my eyes and I will everything I have into this produce flame. And I've never made a flame that big ever since, but it instantly ignited this pyre. It was a raging inferno before long. I started crying, howling. By this point, there were hundreds of wolves come to pay respects, ones we had met over the years. They're all singing and howling and grieving. And I look up at my guardian, this man that's stoic and unemotional, but a tear rolls down his face. We do this through the night, watching it, making sure that the fire takes him, and the morning comes around and it's ash. So unprompted, I just go up and I pick up a handful of ash and just sort of let it get carried on the wind. Papa goes next. And then all of the wolves, in their own way, they line up in a procession and they all just let the ashes go. After most of the ash was gone, I notice there's something sticking out, and I pick it up. It's one fang left. Everything else was gone. I look at it just puzzled, and Papa asked me to hand it over, so I do, and he waves his hand over it and whispers something. He, as he's handing it back to me, he says, "It looks like Sasha wanted you to have this. This will be your druidic focus. Even in death, he's there to guide you, protect you." And so, as I reach for it back and it's in my hands, a lifetime of memories flash through my eyes. My friend. And from then on, every time I touch it, it's this odd sense of calm and communion with nature. That's it.